In the peaceful residential areas surrounding Philadelphia, an enormous estate residence exists wrapped in quietness and dim lighting. Its impressive limestone exterior rises upward resembling a castle from another time period, with sounds from a previous era still moving through unoccupied corridors. Previously recognized as the final American palace comparable to Versailles, Linwood Hall represents a location where magnificence and melancholy blend together. For many decades, it remained unoccupied, a luxurious masterpiece from the Golden Age gradually being affected by the passage of time. Its large reception rooms accumulated layers of fine particles while its outdoor spaces became increasingly wild with vegetation. Still, within its aging structure remain recollections of extravagant social gatherings and remarkable artwork collections, along with the lingering presence of a family's difficult experiences. Currently, after more than 100 years of achievement and challenges, this dormant architectural wonder is experiencing renewal once again. To comprehend Linwood Hall's fascinating character, we must travel backward to the beginning of the 20th century. The calendar shows 1897. America's prosperous age is progressing vigorously, and extraordinary amounts of wealth are being invested in structures representing affluence and status. In Philadelphia, among the wealthiest individuals in the country, Peter Widener begins planning to construct a residence different from anything else. An estate so impressive it would compete with the luxurious royal residences of the European continent. Widener, a powerful figure in commerce who accumulated his wealth through transportation systems, petroleum and iron production, envisioned a family property that would endure through multiple generations. However, his vision also emerged from personal loss. Widener's cherished spouse Hannah had passed away unexpectedly in 1896 while traveling on the family's private vessel. In the midst of profound sorrow, Peter Widener made the decision to depart from their Philadelphia city residence, which he subsequently gifted to the municipality as a reading institution in Hannah's honor, and channel his focus into establishing a fresh countryside property for himself and his offspring. That property would transform into Linwood Hall. Constructing Linwood Hall, Peter Widener located the ideal location in the gently sloping terrain of Elegance Park situated just beyond the metropolitan area. He previously possessed territory in that region. He had preserved an earlier family residence called Linwood Hall on the land. And at this moment he imagined something considerably more impressive on those grounds. In 1897, Widener engaged a prominent figure in architectural design, 29-year-old Horace Trumbauer, to create his envisioned estate. Trumbauer was recognized for elaborate Beaux-Arts creations, and in collaboration with talented interior designers from Paris and Philadelphia, he embarked on establishing an American royal residence. Taking creative influence from continental estates, Trumbauer conceived Linwood Hall in a neoclassical revival aesthetic with an extensive balanced exterior reminiscent of a French manor house. Development commenced in 1897, and throughout the following 2 years, a substantial workforce transformed the location into an impressive limestone residence. When Linwood Hall reached completion in 1899, it had required an extraordinary $8 million, representing several hundred million in contemporary currency, and the outcome was absolutely magnificent. Linwood Hall was and continues to be among the most extensive private dwellings ever constructed in the United States. The estate extended across 110 rooms, featuring no fewer than 55 sleeping chambers and 20 bathing facilities. The primary structure measured nearly 325 feet in overall length. Its exterior, covered in brilliant Indiana limestone, was enhanced by a magnificent central entrance with 6 towering Corinthian pillars supporting a classical triangular pediment. At both ends of the exterior, pavilion sections extended outward, contributing to the structure's commanding appearance. The property initially covered approximately 480 carefully maintained acres of parkland adorned with elaborate outdoor spaces, water features and sculptures. There were facilities for elegant horses, extensive glass structures filled with unusual plants, a vehicle storage building and entrance pavilion, a substantial decorative water body, and even a private electrical generation facility to provide power to the estate, an uncommon convenience at the beginning of the electric era. No financial consideration was withheld to transform Linwood Hall into a self-reliant haven of extravagance. The interior magnificence, richly decorated in gold. Entering through Linwood's entryways was comparable to stepping into a royal palace. Guests proceeded initially through a collection of substantial bronze entrance doors, then through a secondary set of doors covered in gold leaf, arriving into an impressive great entrance hall. This expansive central space extended 2 levels upward, surfaced in a checkerboard pattern of dark and light Italian marble and topped by a remarkable stained glass overhead window that diffused golden sunlight from above. Lines of fluted Renaissance aesthetic pillars and archways surrounded the area, and a magnificent double staircase of carved marble rose upward from the hall, dividing into two graceful flights that climbed to a balcony on the upper floor. Every surface gleamed with old-world luxury. Gilded decorative elements extended along the upper walls. Silk fabric covered the vertical surfaces and expertly carved woodwork decorated entryways and furnishings. To equip his residence, Widener searched throughout Europe for valuable items. Complete historic rooms, wood-paneled reading spaces, ornate sitting room walls, carved fireplace surrounds, and crystal lighting fixtures were acquired from overseas and placed here section by section. The Philadelphia newspaper publication subsequently described Linwood Hall's interior as abundantly decorated with silk, velvet, and gilded decorative elements. Its spaces contained seating that previously enhanced the palaces of Louis XV, oriental floor coverings suitable for royalty, Asian ceramic containers, and corridors decorated with invaluable classical paintings. It represented a genuine collection space disguised as a residence, a lifestyle of magnificence for the Widener family at their home. Beyond the great entrance hall extended a series of luxurious rooms, each possessing its individual personality and function. There existed a ballroom of remarkable dimensions. At exceeding 2,200 square feet, it could easily hold 1,000 attendees beneath its gilded upper surface. The ballroom's vertical surfaces were paneled in abundant walnut, highlighted by fluted pillars gilded in 24-karat gold, and 4 enormous crystal lighting fixtures suspended from an upper surface decorated with intricate plaster craftsmanship. One could readily picture the area sparkling during an elite social dance event, the sound of musical ensemble performances reflecting off the marble surfaces. Adjacent to the ballroom was a magnificent reception space and reading room designed in the aesthetic of Louis XV with light oak wall covering and French limestone, which contained among the country's most remarkable private book collections. Peter Widener's young descendant, Harry Elkins Widener, maintained his assemblage of 3,000 uncommon books in that location, featuring medieval illustrated manuscripts and initial publication literary masterpieces, volumes that he valued and whose destiny would subsequently reach considerably beyond Linwood's boundaries. In other areas on the ground level were a formal eating room capable of accommodating numerous individuals for dinner, a music sitting room with a grand piano instrument, recreational and relaxation rooms for after-dinner entertainment, and multiple dedicated artwork display spaces. On the upper level, the second floor featured numerous sleeping chambers and visitor accommodations, each decorated in luxurious manner. From French Rococo sleeping quarters with painted wood-paneled walls to English Georgian aesthetic chambers with four-posted beds and Chippendale furnishings. The estate even included innovative conveniences for its time period, such as an indoor bathing pool enclosed in a pavilion that also featured a squash recreation area and changing facilities, and among the first private internal communication systems in the region. Every portion of Linwood Hall was created to display wealth, creative excellence, and sophisticated preference. Operating such a property required a considerable workforce of domestic helpers. Linwood Hall reportedly maintained a continuous domestic personnel of 37 who resided on location, caring for the family's everyday requirements and the maintenance of the estate's numerous rooms. And supplementary 60 landscape workers, stable attendants, drivers, and workers managed the widespread grounds and auxiliary structures. Each morning, the property buzzed with movement. Housekeepers removing dust and maintaining shine on the continuous array of reflective surfaces, decorative elements, and marble. Staff members in uniform standing prepared to open entryways and assist at dinner. Food preparation specialists working from early hours in the extensive kitchen areas to create elaborate meals, and landscape workers spreading out across lawns, growing structures, and fruit areas to preserve the landscape's perfect appearance. There were vehicle operators preparing horses and vehicles for the family's excursions. Subsequently, automobile drivers for the modern vehicles and stable workers caring for thoroughbreds in the facility. The Widener family embraced a way of living designed after European nobility, a realm in which formal dinners, weekend recreational gatherings, and domestic staff signals sounding in the corridors were simply elements of the daily pattern. Indeed, Linwood Hall was not merely a residence. It represented a self-contained domain of advantage operated with exceptional organization by its personnel. For Peter Widener and his family members, Linwood Hall rapidly became the focal point of their existence. Peter relocated into the estate with his two remaining sons, George and Joseph, and their family members. The property was planned as a hereditary location where multiple generations would reside under one magnificent structure. Elite society promptly gathered to Linwood Hall's entrances. The Widener family hosted elaborate gatherings, dance events, and musical performances that attracted the eastern coastal elite to Elkins Park. On December 19, 1899, even before the estate was entirely completed, Peter organized an opening celebration in his new residence. 400 attendees, the finest of Philadelphia and New York society, wandered amazed through the sparkling rooms as the New York Symphony Orchestra performed and celebrated opera soprano Johanna Gotsky's vocal performance filled the ballroom. It represented the first of numerous magnificent occasions. Throughout the subsequent years, dignitaries and business leaders from throughout the nation and from other countries visited Linwood Hall. It is reported that influential figures of the period such as William Kissam Vanderbilt, businessman Harvey Samuel Firestone, and other distinguished personalities were hosted there as dinner or weekend visitors. For a period, Linwood Hall genuinely was a focal point of luxury, a private palace where each day could resemble a scene from the prosperous age's magnificent display. The ocean liner disaster, still amid all the magnificence, circumstances had more difficult intentions for the Widener family. By the early 1910s, Peter Widener was progressing in years, and his eldest son George had become a notable society personality in his individual right. George Dunton Widener was married to a delightful young socialite, Eleanor Elkins Widener, with no family connection before marriage despite the identical surname, and together they had two offspring, Harry and Eleanor. The extended family spent considerable time at Linwood Hall, and Peter envisioned his inheritance continuing through George's descendants. In reality, an elaborate wedding was being arranged at Linwood Hall for Peter's granddaughter, George's sister, also named Eleanor, in the springtime of 1912. However, circumstances intervened in a manner nobody could have anticipated. The Widener name was about to become permanently associated with an ocean disaster that affected the entire world. In April 1912, George and Eleanor Widener and their 27-year-old son Harry were traveling throughout Europe. To return to America, they reserved first-class accommodations on the brand-new ocean vessel everyone was discussing, the RMS Titanic. This was no typical journey. Titanic was the most extensive, most luxurious vessel floating at that moment, and its initial journey was a highly anticipated occasion among the prosperous and fashionable. Peter Widener, with his substantial investments in the International Mercantile Marine, the organization that owned Titanic's White Star Line, had close connections to the vessel's operators, and his son George was received like royalty aboard. During the journey, George Widener even organized an elaborate dinner gathering in Titanic's first-class dining room, reportedly in recognition of Captain Edward J. Smith. The finest wines were served, and the Widener family interacted with aristocrats, business leaders, and notable figures aboard the magnificent new vessel, never imagining the disaster that awaited in the frozen waters of the North Atlantic. On the evening of April 14, 1912, the unimaginable occurred. Titanic collided with an iceberg in the freezing North Atlantic. In the early morning hours of April 15, the magnificent vessel went under and sank, and with it, more than 1,500 lives were lost. Among those who did not survive were George Dunton Widener and his son Harry. In the confusion of the vessel going under, George reportedly assisted his wife Eleanor and others into a rescue boat, ensuring their survival. Eleanor and a small number of first-class travelers were rescued. However, George and Harry never departed from the vessel. The information of the Titanic sinking sent shock throughout the entire world and immersed the Widener family into deep mourning. Back at Linwood Hall, happy preparations for young Eleanor's forthcoming wedding were suddenly stopped. Instead of a magnificent celebration, the marriage was a restrained, quiet ceremony conducted in the presence of deep loss. The corridors of Linwood, once filled with music and happiness, were now quiet with sorrow. Eleanor Widener, who survived the maritime disaster, subsequently channeled her profound loss into a permanent memorial. She contributed Harry's treasured book assemblage to Harvard University and provided funding for a magnificent library structure in his recognition. The Harry Elkins Widener Memorial Library, finished in 1915, guaranteed that her son's appreciation of literature would be maintained permanently at the center of Harvard's educational campus. However, even that gesture of remembrance could not remove the deep emotional impact upon Linwood Hall. For family leader Peter Widener, the loss of his eldest son and cherished grandson was overwhelming. Already in delicate health, Peter spent his remaining years in the residence that must have seemed suddenly less complete despite all its gilded magnificence. He stepped back from considerable public engagement, managing quietly to his commercial matters and finding comfort in his artwork assemblage and his spiritual beliefs. On November 6, 1915, Peter A.B. Widener passed away at LYNWOOD Hall at the age of 80. Some expressed that he passed from profound sorrow. His memorial notice in the newspapers described his rise from modest origins and his extensive fortune and charitable giving. However, it also mentioned the series of difficulties that overshadowed his final years. With Peter's passing, a period concluded at LYNWOOD Hall. The estate he had constructed as a magnificent family inheritance now transferred to his only remaining offspring, his younger son Joseph. The inheritance progresses forward. Joseph E. Widener had been participating in the family property from the starting point. And in 1915, he received LYNWOOD Hall together with the responsibility that accompanied it. He also received a remarkable fortune, an estimated $60 million, an almost inconceivable amount at that period, representing several $billion in contemporary value. Joseph was a refined and community-minded individual, very much his father's son regarding passion for artwork and horse breeding and the superior aspects of existence. He relocated into LYNWOOD Hall with his wife Ella and their 2 offspring. Committed to honoring his father's inheritance, Joseph preserved the residence in all its magnificence and continued the traditions of welcoming guests and charitable giving that the Widener family were recognized for. In reality, Joseph promptly began updating and enhancing the property. In 1916, he engaged celebrated French landscape architect Jacques Griber to redesign LYNWOOD Hall's formal outdoor spaces in refined French aesthetic. The outcome was a wonderful collection of elevated areas and pathways, carefully maintained lawns and flower beds, a rose garden, and a magnificent central reflecting water feature fed by fountains. One notable feature was a wonderful bronze fountain sculpture at the conclusion of an extended viewing line commissioned from Henri Léon Griber, Jacques' father, which became the central point of the French gardens. Under Joseph's supervision, LYNWOOD Hall remained a display location of beauty. However, even Joseph may have recognized that the period of private palaces was diminishing. The world was transforming outside the property's entrance structures. The First World War had occurred and concluded. The prosperous 1920s and the economic downturn period were approaching. And the practical considerations of preserving such a massive property were starting to be questioned by the following generation. The public sale process. Almost right away after Joseph's passing, the procedure of reducing LYNWOOD Hall's remaining magnificence commenced. In 1944, the Widener descendants organized an extensive public sale on the location to offer the contents that were remaining in the residence, the furniture, decorative items, and personal belongings that Joseph had not contributed or transferred. It was a remarkable occasion in its own somber manner. Purchasers from everywhere gathered in LYNWOOD's once celebratory ballroom now converted into a sale space. Local community members, historic item dealers, and representatives for collections like the Philadelphia Museum of Art and New York's Metropolitan Museum arrived to place offers on sections of the property. Invaluable oriental floor coverings, carved Louis XVI seating, oil paintings that had been displayed in less prominent areas of the residence, collections of fine dining items and silverware, and even the estate's functional fixtures like kitchen items all were offered for public sale. The Philadelphia Museum obtained a 31 by 12-foot oriental carpet from LYNWOOD's assemblage for $87,500. At that period, a substantial amount. Others purchased crystal lighting fixtures that once sparkled in the reception room or marble fireplace surrounds that were removed from the vertical surfaces. Throughout a few days of intense bidding, section by section, LYNWOOD Hall's interior valuable items were distributed to fresh owners. The sounds of the auctioneer's hammer replaced the music that previously filled those spaces. When the public sale was finished, the estate was left with sounds and mostly empty, its wonderful rooms hollowed out. During this identical time period in the middle 1940s, substantial portions of LYNWOOD Hall's extensive grounds were also transferred to new ownership. The period of enormous properties had concluded, and there was interest for fresh residential housing in surrounding areas. In 1944, approximately 220 acres of the property, primarily the outer agricultural land and open areas, were transferred to a building company for about $660,000. On that territory, a residential community called LYNWOOD Gardens was promptly constructed, permanently transforming the landscape that had previously been extensive private parkland. By the late 1940s, LYNWOOD Hall itself, now without artwork and most furnishings and limited to a section of about 33 or 34 acres surrounding the estate, was offered for purchase. It demonstrated challenging to locate a purchaser. The world had transformed considerably from the beginning of the century. Limited individuals or organizations had the interest or resources to assume a 110-room estate, even at a significantly lowered price. For multiple years, Linwood Hall remained on the market with no interested parties, its windows covered, and its future questionable. Eventually, in 1948, the nearly unoccupied estate did transfer to new ownership, although under circumstances far from prestigious. Linwood Hall was transferred at a law enforcement sale, essentially a public auction, required due to unpaid property charges or financial obligations. A local property building company, recognizing an opportunity, acquired the estate together with its remaining 33-acre core property for the surprisingly modest sum of approximately $130,000. This remarkably reduced price, roughly representing only $1.7 million in contemporary currency, was a significant decline from distinction for a property that had previously required millions to construct. The building company's plans were not to reside in Linwood Hall, but presumably to transfer or repurpose it. However, he discovered that transferring such a distinctive property was not simple. Preserving the enormous structure with no resident family and no clear purpose demonstrated impractical. The building company promoted the property, anticipating perhaps a prosperous purchaser or an organization like an educational institution or medical facility might be interested. However, no appropriate fresh owner appeared. For a few additional years, Linwood Hall remained in uncertain circumstances, its refined rooms accumulating fine particles and its outdoor spaces becoming increasingly wild. The magnificent residence awaiting an uncertain destiny. The reduction of beauty. Linwood Hall continued to experience decline during the religious educational institution years. Faith Theological Seminary experienced financial difficulties, and preserving a 110-room estate was not achievable. To reduce expenses, the religious educational institution removed and transferred valuable architectural components, walnut wall covering, marble fireplace surrounds, bronze fixtures, and even sections of the outdoor spaces, including the Grieber Fountain, which subsequently appeared at a 2006 public sale. By the 1970s to 80s, numerous rooms were vacant, sealed off, or significantly affected from water entering through deteriorating roofs and outdated systems. The estate structure survived, but its magnificence diminished. The religious educational institution eventually faced its individual challenges and departed from the property. After legal and financial complications, featuring unpaid property charges, Linwood Hall went to law enforcement sale in 1996, acquired by the First Korean Church of New York. Although there were concepts for spiritual gatherings, church utilization or redevelopment, area regulations, and substantial restoration expenses made progress not achievable. The church maintained the property with only fundamental maintenance. Throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, Linwood Hall remained unoccupied and continuing to deteriorate. A previously magnificent property sitting without attention among residential areas. City stories and intrigue. As the 21st century began, Linwood Hall's destiny remained uncertain. The previously glorious property had at this moment spent more years in decline and without occupancy than it had in its prime period. Community members in Elkins Park communicated quietly that the previous Widener estate possessed supernatural presence. How could it not be, considering its difficult history and mysterious boarded appearance? The property's metal entrance structures remained secured, and warning signs were displayed to discourage interested individuals. However, unavoidably the estate's fascinating character attracted people inward. City explorers and adventurous photographers occasionally moved past the barrier and discovered methods inside. A damaged basement window in this location, an unsecured service entrance in that location. What they found was simultaneously disheartening and captivating. Particle-covered rooms with deteriorating wall covering and distorted wood flooring extended outward in quietness. In the previously wonderful ballroom, surface coating deteriorated from the gilded upper surface. However, when afternoon sunlight came through the tall windows, it still brightened the area with a supernatural beauty, particle specks moving in the light beams. The magnificent indoor bathing pool, without water, existed in deteriorated condition with surface tiles breaking and climbing plants entering from damaged windows. Corridors that had previously been active with domestic staff and visitors were at this moment dim and covered with fallen surface coating, leading to numerous vacant sleeping chambers where sections of surface coating upper structure and faded window coverings remained on the surface. Despite decades without attention, numerous of Linwood Hall's fundamental elements, its marble staircases, its elaborate surface coating upper structures and decorative elements, the wrought iron protective barriers of its magnificent stairs, remained present, though delicate. In certain rooms, overlooked items of the past remained distributed. A previous leather traveling case in this location, a damaged reflective surface in that location, a monogrammed dining plate covered in particles, as if the supernatural presence of previous residents had only recently departed. Explorers even found concealed areas. One hidden chamber positioned behind the staff serving area and placed between levels contained a vertical surface of small secure storage lined in blue velvet. A hidden storage space not indicated on any level arrangement where the Widener family likely secured their most treasured jewelry and papers. Each fresh finding contributed to the story of Linwood Hall as a location stopped in time, at the same moment impressive and sorrowful. One bold explorer, photographer Leland Kent, recorded the estate comprehensively in the late 2000s for his online platform, Abandoned Southeast, bringing broader awareness to Linwood's difficult situation. In the lower sections of the structure, Kent made an particularly fascinating discovery: a mysterious below-ground passage system. In the foundation behind a substantial steel entryway, he discovered a corridor that extended into darkness. Traveling a brief distance with a portable light, he understood the passage separated in multiple directions. It appeared to continue extensively beneath the property. Subsequently, construction arrangements and the recollections of previous personnel would disclose that a complex network of passages indeed existed beneath Linwood Hall, linking the primary residence to auxiliary structures like the power generation facility, the vehicle storage building Linwood Lodge, and the distant entrance pavilion, and housing the estate's water systems, electrical pathways, and heating channels. One passage even offered a hidden route likely utilized by domestic staff to transport unseen between the residence and the food preparation areas or service structures. In the period of without occupancy, however, these passages only increased the atmosphere of intrigue surrounding the property. They were dark, material-covered, and affected by water in locations clearly not accessed for decades. Kent's photographs of the passage with its masonry-lined vertical surfaces extending into darkness captured people's interest and strengthened the perception that Linwood Hall still contained mysteries in its lower sections. Inheritance of a palace. Linwood Hall's extended narrative is a meaningful reflection of American history, the reaching upward achievements and overwhelming difficulties of wealth, the temporary nature of even the most magnificent structures, and the continuing influence of inheritance. This estate has been numerous things. A family refuge and display location, a platform for elite society's sparkling celebrations, a location of unimaginable personal difficulty, an educational organization, a deteriorating point of interest, and at this moment a phoenix experiencing renewal from the circumstances of without attention. The description "the final American palace comparable to Versailles" refers to its exceptional magnificence and the period it represents. A period of luxury that will probably never be witnessed again on American territory. Limited, if any, properties of such magnitude and aspiration will ever be constructed fresh. That transforms preserving Linwood Hall not merely a community concern, but a countrywide one. It represents an existing item from the American prosperous age, as significant in its manner as any painting or section of literature from that period. Moving through its corridors currently, one can almost perceive the presence of Peter Widener and his family members observing. Perhaps surprised that the realm they understood has so extensively disappeared, still surely satisfied to witness their residence filled with light, creative excellence, and meaning once additional. After decades of dormancy under a covering of particles, Linwood Hall is experiencing movement. A dormant beauty experiencing renewal to a second existence. Its gilded corridors, previously intended for disappearance, will promptly open to fresh generations of visitors. They will move where the Widener family moved, express amazement at the skill and magnitude, and understand the teachings of its history, the delicate nature of magnificence, the strength of visions, and the significance of careful management. In protecting Linwood Hall, more has been achieved than the restoration of a structure. A section of the American narrative with all its excellence and intricacy has been recovered. The final American palace comparable to Versailles will continue forward, not as a supernatural item, but as an active connection between previous times and the time ahead, guaranteeing that the sounds of its music and the illumination of its lights will never again be disappeared to the passage of time.